Hello and welcome to the weather forecast.
Hello.
The long-awaited weather forecast, because we have been absent for what, like a month?
Hello. Yes, we released a game or something.
We released an expansion, see my partner here. We released a very important expansion we've been working on for like a year for Book of Hours. So thus proving that we actually are game developers and not just
also proving
people making stuff up about games.
If you buy our games on launch and get Perpetual Edition, you get this bloody gigantic expansion,
which people seem
free,
to like.
Which people do seem to like.
So that's nice.
Anyway, if you bought Book of Hours, then you absolutely should get House of Light, because it's all the stuff that I would have put in if I'd got more time, and it's been rapturously received. And if Book of Hours isn't your thing, then I wouldn't bother going near it, because it'd be even less your thing. Marketing.
Yeah, overwhelmingly positive there from Alexis. Thanks so much for that.
I think we're 93% actually.
Okay, that's better. That's more compelling data for the viewers. But if you are tuning in for the first time and have no idea what we're talking about, this is the series where Alexis and myself try to predict how a game will do when it launches. And we look at...
Spin the wheel.
No, that's not what we do. We look at data.
Yes.
And we look at the top 10 popular upcoming games on Steam, which, to be clear, is regional. So if you're not in the UK like we are, you will probably see a slightly different list, but I would bet a lot of them are the same. And we take the top 10 upcoming games that are coming out today, and we look at the numbers that are publicly available for anyone to have a look at, so you can have a look at too, and we try and extrapolate from those numbers how successful we think the game will be in week one. And why do we look at week one?
Why do we look at week one?
I'm doing all the work here, everyone, because week one review numbers on Steam are public data. Everyone can see how many reviews have been left and what the number of positive reviews is. And this is a very good proxy, thank you, for how successful a game will be overall, because you make the most amount of your sales when you launch, you make the most amount of your sales within week one, and you can then often extrapolate out from that how many sales you expect to get in month one, in year one, etc., etc. So it's a really good way of figuring out how successful a game is actually going to be and has already been in 1 week. And
broadly, the numbers that have been bandied around, thanks to Boxlighter Burkett et al., are reviews that tend to be like 30 to 50 times sales per review-ish, and you tend to see maybe 3 to 4 times the sales in week one over the rest of the year. So week one really is important. Now these change enormously in different cases in different games, but that's the baseline you keep going back to. So we try to predict the number of reviews in week one based on, as I always say, in some cases, entire minutes of research.
I actually did a genuine research this episode.
You did a research?
I did a research so people will be able to find out some things. So shall we get onto the things?
Yeah, please.
Right. Well, first thing, we get the spreadsheet up and
we have to hold ourselves accountable for our past misdeeds.
Okay, well that's the most boring way you could possibly say it. We see if we were right or not.
Misdeeds. It sounds a little bit like we're in the prologue of some sort of fantasy novel.
Yeah, okay.
Probably like Joe Abercrombie or somebody,
That's
it's a bit dark.
I suppose. A little hat. Right. So last week, technically not last week, like a month ago, but you take the point. The 10 games that we spoke about, we started with Storm Edge, which was this pixel art ARPG. And we guessed it would do somewhere between 270 and 352 reviews week one, and it got...
103.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't. I'm sorry. I was looking at the Steam page.
Fallen at the first hurdle.
81. I can't read the right numbers from the right page.
I even highlighted it for you.
You did, I know.
Okay.
But so I was suffering from Weltschmerz.
It got Stop using that excuse, Kennedy. It got 81, so it underperformed against what we were expecting. Now, that doesn't mean that the game was bad or that they did anything wrong. There are loads of factors that go into a launch. And just a reminder that none of our estimates or realities in this series are anything about judging the value or the kind of worth of a game. We're just looking at what happened and seeing if we can predict reliably how games will do.
That said, it is in mixed reviews. I'm not sure what the actual percentage is, but one of the things that I noticed when you were trying to predict it is that there was quite a sort of mixed response on the forums to the demo, because this is quite a well-populated and well-established subgenre, and people knew what they wanted from it, and they weren't getting exactly what they wanted. So I think that contributed to its decline. And now, Lottie's helpfully highlighted for me that 71%, which is the bottom edge of mixed,
That's not true.
No, I'm just talking nonsense today.
You haven't had your coffee yet. No, so 71% is what it got at the end of week 1. So you'll be able to look at the numbers now and they'll be slightly different. So the reason Alexis Paul-Lam has been confused is we are looking at the current Steam page for Storm Edge, which is currently in mixed, on 69%. So 2% difference, but 70% is the
71% is the bottom edge of mostly positive.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Or positive, I think it is actually, rather than mostly positive. So
is it? Okay.
Yeah, so it's okay. You just say here look pretty. So this site underperformed. We think it's probably to do with some design decisions made. And I'm surprised, honestly, that the Chinese multiplier that I predicted did not come into play. But maybe they can pull it back.
The conventional wisdom is that games that release in China review worse. I've heard 5% worse on average. I've heard 20% worse on average.
It's only chance of their own experience. Chinese players do seem to be very happy to be critical in a good way, but perhaps more so than their European counterparts.
What a Chinese game dev told us is that Chinese players like to play games the way that they like to play games. So they expect the experience to be what they want.
And they want to be able to customise that.
Exactly,
if you can't get it, they sort of think the game is at fault rather than it's not the game for them.
Again, we are generalising about a nation of 1.4 billion people, to be clear. So,
and to be clear, we love them. Please don't be cross with us. Next game that we reviewed last episode is Mexico 1921, A Deep Slumber.
Yeah, I predicted it would do 35. Lottie predicted it would do
69.
And in fact it did.
Only 19, but it did get 94%. Now, the numbers that we predicted were in double digits. So we were not expecting this to make huge amounts of money. And my suspicion is the devs were not expecting that either, which is great, because the important thing is not how many numbers you do in week 1, it's whether it matches what you expect to do in week 1. Because the worst thing is the heartbreak of a dev thinking they're going to sell 1 million copies and selling not 1 million copies. So this was obviously always a heart cry from a very heartfelt dev about an important moment in history in Mexico. So this, just saying that, I'm not saying you get to play as a hot person who shoots things, which is a kind of classic recipe for a successful commercial game. This is clearly an artistic niche game, and unfortunately, it didn't find huge numbers on Steam, but I have no idea what other platforms it's on or what the devs.
Well, the other thing is, as I think I mentioned last time, I fired up the demo, and the opening screen has splashes from 2 different cultural institutions in Mexico. So I assume they got a grant for this. So I assume that
yes,
gave them an upside, and it's clearly an interesting, unusual, intentionally educational game. Made with government money, and I like that it exists.
Exactly.
I'm not surprised they didn't make much.
Exactly, it's more the art end than the commercial end, and that's great that coexists. Edge of Sanity.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one.
Go on.
Well, okay, so this is Lovecraftian, roguelike-y, Darkest Dungeon-y, this is exactly my kind of jam. In terms of the theme, although maybe not in terms of the gameplay, because frankly I'm a coward. And we estimated somewhere between 210 and 261 reviews, and it got
52.
And it was also my wild card. I have to come clean about this. And I thought it might catch on because it Darkest Dungeon has been an absolute phenomenon, and from what I could see of this, it was a fun, schlocky Lovecraftian story that everyone likes. But for some reason, it didn't take off. Especially, I'm confused because the rating was 88% positive at the end of week 1, so it wasn't like it was in mix and that was putting people off or there were significant bugs or anything. So I don't get it. One
of the things I said in my notes is that it looks a lot like Darkest Dungeon in art style, and I predicted it might end up in mostly positive because of expectation mismatch. It didn't. It ended up at 88%.
But it is currently in mostly positive, looking at the
in the recent
Steam.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's part of it. Is that people thought it was one kind of game and it ended up being
That's very
another.
True. That's famously the biggest mistake I think you can make in games marketing is basically allowing people to have an understanding of your game before they play it that is wrong. So if they did end up in that situation, that could explain it.
Ah, yes.
Next one.
Lucky Tower Ultimate. So this completely bewildered us. Somebody said in the comments to the last video that this is based on an ancient and beloved Flash game, which makes sense of the otherwise very unusual proposition. And this one I predicted 82. No, I didn't. I predicted 90 reviews week 1.
And I predicted 110.
And it did 180, significantly better.
Well, I think same ballpark.
Yeah, same ballpark.
So I'm giving this to us, but also I'm happy that they did bigger numbers than we expected.
Next one.
Oh, okay, I thought we were going to talk about
Oh,
it.
sorry.
I think it's just worth saying this is early access, which often is a bit of a kind of randomizer because sometimes it puts people off, but in this case, clearly it didn't. I suspect it's because the developer is so unusual that this wasn't a kind of casual Steam browser like, oh, I've never heard of this dev and it looks like every other game I've ever played, so maybe I'll wait till 1.0. I think people saw this, were like, oh, these are the people who made The Longing. Oh, this is something I haven't seen before. Sure, I'll pick it up.
Yeah, so Studio Cyphers made The Longing, this very unusual game that played out in real time, even when it was turned off. And I erroneously said last time that didn't do great numbers. It did actually great numbers. So they clearly have a following.
Yeah.
And also never bet against nostalgia.
That's true. Well, and I'm rooting for these guys as well. I have no connection with them. I don't know anything about them, but I love the fact that they are making weird games that you can't get elsewhere because that's what we do. So I'm delighted to see someone else doing it and succeeding. Alrighty. This is your one.
Yeah, this is Pyrene or Pyrene, possibly.
Yes.
It's a roguelike-y sort of thing based on Pyrenean, Southern French or Basque mythology from a very small studio called Two Tiny Dice.
And I was quite down on it, not because I didn't think it looked good, but because I thought I'd seen a lot of games that looked like this. So I only guessed 95 reviews, and Alexis thought that he could see things in it that were unusual as somebody who does play a lot of roguelike card games.
Again,
so
not that many, but enough to
but
get
more than me,
it, yeah.
And you guessed 200. And
yeah, the number said 72, and I thought maybe 200 just because it's got something, and I think it might. And in fact, it did 230 reviews week one. So.
With a 95% positive rating.
Yeah.
So what this is, so the numbers that we are using are essentially a follower count that we can then extrapolate out to wishlist numbers, which we can then extrapolate out into presumable sales in week one. So all of this is available, but these numbers did suggest it was going to do something more like 72 or 95 reviews. The fact that it did 230 reviews in week one is both delightful because I'm really happy for the devs, but also quite frightening as a developer because it means that the numbers behind the scenes don't always tell you the truth.
They must have been, I would hope, delighted with this launch for a first game for a small team.
It's not the first game actually.
Oh, my mistake, you're right, of course.
But they are a small team. Yeah. So yeah, I'm delighted for them and they deserve it.
Yeah. Funko Fusion. About as different from the previous game as you can get.
So this is not a game that you or I would normally play. It's worth saying it's sort of totally end of the spectrum from where we are. And we get somewhere between 120 and 214 reviews.
192.
Bang on the money.
Bang on the money.
So people seem to like it because it has lots of characters that they love from elsewhere coming in, which is fun. There did seem to be some design problems. It was 192, so bang on the money, but it only had 67% positive. But that's still a good number. You can easily bring it up, and it looks like they have brought it up recently. So yeah, we got that one right.
Right.
Smashed it.
Foul damage.
Oh, the little egg one.
The little egg one.
So we always say that puzzle platformers or just puzzle games generally on Steam struggle to do the numbers. Of course, everybody can think of some exceptions. For example, Peggle recently did very well. Braid.
Peglin?
Peglin, sorry, not Peggle. Peggle did well ages ago. Peglin did well recently. So we guessed somewhere between
46 and 34.
And it did.
24.
So again, we were roughly right, and it's worth saying, calling this one out, they got 100% positive of those reviews.
And in fact, now looking at my notes, the reason why I thought it would do a bit better is because the publisher behind this, the GoDev, had just published Peglin, which did really well.
Yeah.
But obviously it was just too different for the audience to translate much.
And we increasingly are of the opinion, correct me if you disagree, that publishers do not have the effect that people seem to assume that they will have. You can have the best publisher for your game, and it cannot make a single jot of difference. And it can help. I'm not saying don't get a publisher, but I am saying that I would not necessarily assume that even if you got the best publisher for your genre, they are a sort of certainty of success, because evidently that is not the case. Shokudo Underworld!
Oh, yeah!
I love this one! This is a really cute little kind of horrible eldritch but still sweet, like sushi restaurant management thing.
So in follower numbers, this was nowhere, but it had velocity. The numbers had spiked a bit in the weeks going out to launch, and it clearly had charm. So I hoped it would beat the numbers a little bit and go all the way up from sort of my initial estimate of 12 to about 30. You're a bit more downbeat.
Well, I just go with it. Unless I have a strong feeling, I go with what the numbers tell me, whereas you are more bold, so you are able to take
Spin the wheel.
So I only guessed 16 reviews, and I'm delighted to say that it got 59 reviews week one, which is great. We haven't done our benchmark that we will annoy everyone with by saying, to be clear, we would say for a professional indie developer, anywhere between 100 and 500 reviews week one is your sort of expected bucket where you can really say, yeah, I did really well there. But of course, it totally depends on the resources you put into the game and how big your team is and whether this is your first game and what kind of genre it is and all this kind of stuff. So 59 is a really respectable number, I think, for this very small dev, especially because the numbers behind the scenes were not suggesting it would do huge.
I was joking the other day to Lottie that I get cost control Tattooed on one set of knuckles and control Tattooed on the other, which requires some creative placement. But because for an indie dev, it's the least sexy thing imaginable, but it's so important because every quid you don't spend on your game is a quid you don't need to make back in revenue. And honestly, you know, if we hadn't been, we've done pretty well, but if we hadn't been really careful about spending money, we wouldn't be here. So
that's why you should marry a producer.
It's true. But you got married Lottie, she's mine.
It's true, I'm unavailable these days. Dragon Spirits 2, the penultimate game we reviewed last episode. This was another Chinese RPG that we thought we'd do in the wide gulf between 59 and 60 reviews. And which one of us got it right?
78.
Kind of both of us, but neither of us, but same ballpark.
But yeah, it's pretty close. So this was some series you didn't really understand that obviously had a bit of following, but not much, and it did decently.
And the final one from our favourite type of developer, which are the French.
We stand French developers because they do such interesting work.
They do. We guessed it would do between 25 and 35 reviews week one, again because it's a small unknown developer and it's got a puzzly game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately it only got 7 in week one, which means it actually didn't have enough to give it a overall positivity rating. Steam only gives an overall positivity rating if you've got 10 or more reviews. So I hope they are not too upset. It doesn't say anything about the quality of the game. It perhaps could have done with some more marketing, or maybe it launched at a bad time. I obviously don't know the details, but
puzzle games on Steam are hard.
Puzzle games on Steam are really hard. So in the right ballpark, but I hope they can pull it out in the future.
So this week
onto 10 new shiny popular upcoming games, and this week is actually a really interesting selection because firstly we're currently in Steam Next Fest, which most indie devs will avoid launching in because there's so much noise on Steam that you probably miss out on some visibility, although you know some people say that's a good opportunity. And secondly, we're coming up to Halloween. So a lot of people are either holding back to release on Halloween if they're making a spooky game, or trying to get things out in advance. So this is a really interesting mix, this episode, I think. Starting with
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants Unleashed.
Yeah, so
my notes say eat pizza to recover health.
So I'm aware that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a thing. I grew up in the 90s, but I was a girl, so this wasn't really geared towards me. And this is a game that's clearly been made by devs who know what they're doing, with money behind it. I'm not sure it has a lot of buzz behind the scenes from what I can see. It seems like a kind of classic action IP-tied game, so I am going to guess 52 reviews week one.
I think so. I'm old enough to remember when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a sort of slightly edgy.
Were you into them?
No, but I knew people who were, and I think I once played the TMNT tabletop RPG from Palladium Games.
Of course you did.
And just the phrase Palladium Games will mean something to a whole generation of people. But it reminds me now, the franchise, I mean not this game, of a sort of seaside town that's past its best. Because there was a time it was this sort of underground, beloved, independent, the early independent comic book success stories. I think it sort of took itself quite seriously, except that the characters were mutant turtles.
Who could speak and named after artists.
And apparently the creators originally wanted to come up with sort of authentic sounding Japanese names that just didn't know enough about Japanese culture. So they hit on this gag of making the turtle sensei a fan of European Renaissance art. And then it's sort of, it's been through several evolutions, and there was a comic and there was a film, and it's obviously sort of intentionally silly franchise these days, and it's I think I said earlier, never bet against nostalgia, so I'm going to give the sort of 50% bump on what I'd estimate and say it'll be all the way up to maybe 60 reviews.
We will see.
What was your prediction?
52, so the same thing. I just don't really know who it's for. That's the thing. Like, okay, I'm not like a kindergarten teacher, so I don't have a wide breadth of understanding of what the proper kiddies are into these days. But, you know, I've got friends who've got young kids, and I've been with you since you've had a 6-year-old girl. And I've just never heard any child mention Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or I've never seen a kid go to nursery with a little backpack with the Ninja Turtles on the back. So I'm sort of confused.
Well, this is why I think nostalgia will have but because I think, you know, people my age or your age will be scrolling through Steam and will think, oh yeah, I quite like those back in the day.
Well, that's why I'm confused though, because I agree with that. But then I look at the gameplay, and the gameplay looks quite simplified and quite child friendly, as of course it should be, because it's a kid's IP. So I don't know.
I see what you mean.
Maybe it will massively outperform my expectations, but yeah, behind the scenes, 52 is my guess. How to build a flying city. I don't think it actually tells you how to build a flying city, so I think we should have a public service announcement that anybody who's trying to build whatever that place is called in Bioshock, don't play this game.
No.
That's not how Bioshock's flying city was made.
Raptors is the underwater one. What was the flying one?
That's the thing I can't remember. Like, was it like heaven or some sort of celestial?
It was a Greek-derived word. It was something like panoplia or...
I hope you're enjoying listening to two people trying to remember things live on YouTube. I hope this is exactly the content that you've tuned in for.
Lonnie's not even old. The Rhapsody, no.
Wasn't it Rhapsody?
No. Oh. Anyway, so I watched the trailer for this, and there's an actual game in here. I thought it was just ladies in very tight armour talking to you, but there's some sort of dungeony bit and some screenful of numbers. Look, it's one of these Japanese games that Kagura, who do imports and localizations, are doing. It's very hard to get an insight into either what the original audience is or what the audience for imports over here is. There will be a furious subculture with very definite opinions.
Yeah.
But I don't think this will do numbers. I'm guessing 35.
I think this is a game that has probably been made in the spirit of budgeting is very important. So, you know, it doesn't look super expensive to me, which doesn't mean it's bad. We make a whole career out of making games on as small a budget as possible. But my point is, I think this is probably a game that is quite like a lot of other games, which is why people will buy it if they like that sort of game. So I agree with AK. I don't think this is going to do huge numbers, but as long as it's what the devs expect, that's fine. So I'm going to guess slightly more positively, 47 reviews, week 1.
Cool.
Now this one I am fascinated by, Alterium. Did you listen to the trailer? Did you watch the trailer?
I literally can't remember because there are a couple of quite similar ones.
It was great because, well, it amused me because it starts off, it's beautiful, graphically gorgeous, and you start the trailer and there's this like old Western man who's saying these profound things, but then every so often the words will sound real weird because we're a cowboy, which to my British ears I just thought was hilarious.
Are you British? Because after that I thought you were from Montana.
Hi, it's Cowboy Rick here. Lottie's had to step out for a mite.
My God, where's my wife gone?
See, this is more hashtag content that the people want.
Yeah.
We're going to be stars.
What's the name of that shitty comp?
It's in the box, nobody knows. So this is, I'm interested in this because it looks so moneyed, right? It looks so expensive. We are never going to be able to make a game that looks this shiny. But it comes with a big asterisk because it is playing a dangerous game. It is a PvP co-op horror game, playable by 1 to 5 players, and that just makes everything much more complicated. I have never made a multiplayer game, but I understand that they are essentially a world of pain, although of course if you do it right and you succeed, they're also a world of money, which presumably is the intent here. But I would guess that they are releasing this at this time because it is spooky season and everyone's gearing up for Halloween, and what I am fascinated by particularly is this looks so polished and professional in AAA, but then the numbers behind the scenes I couldn't believe. They're very low and I don't understand what's happening. And the kind of activity that I can see publicly is not very, like, there's not a lot of it. So the last update on the Steam page, for example, was from the 10th of August. So I'm very confused by what's going on here.
Yeah, I hesitate to say fast follow, but asymmetric horror games are having a moment on Steam. And I think there's another asymmetric horror game also in our list this week.
Can you just define asymmetric horror game?
a co-op horror game where so it's like Dead by Daylight, I think, is the biggest one that people know about, where one person is playing the villain. My kid used to play Flee the Facility on Roblox, very similar thing. So it's sort of
so that's what it means. That some people play the baddies and some people play the
well, there's different versions of it, but I think you generally got sort of one person who's the slasher killer or the murderer or the hunter or whatever,
right?
And you've got a bunch of other people, often with different powers, who can try to
got it,
to escape it. And I think you could probably put together quite a lot of game quite quickly if you've got good programmers and your maybe purchasing assets. I don't know, if they have purchase assets here. But there was something about it that suggests there's not a particularly unified vision. I mean, I'm not sure why it's called Altaria. I'm not sure why it's about cowboys, and I'm not sure how much of the screenshots are actually Wild West. So I think it might be a side project.
Well, I looked into the devs actually because I was so fascinated by this. Jess Blue Tech, they haven't released any games on Steam that I can find. As far as I can tell, they appear to be a publishing and analytics studio who are branching out for the first time.
That makes sense.
Into their own IP. So I suspect that they are very talented developers who have not been creatively on their own before.
Columbia. Is the name of the city in Bioshock Infinite? I'm so sorry.
Right.
Yes. So Latin derived, not Greek derived. Never mind.
How embarrassing.
How embarrassing.
So yes, I think that's probably why you're feeling the way you are. That they seem very competent and the end result seems super polished, but also there's something a bit weird about it. Yeah. And I can't put my finger on what it is.
So as you said, there's not much in the way of impressive numbers on things like follow accounts or forum activity, and there was a lot of competition in the asymmetric horror space these days. And the thing about co-op games, there's as I always say, it's a curve with sharp ends.
Code.
It's netcode, but these games are sticky, because if you're playing the game that your friends are playing, you're going to keep playing that. And once you get a sort of a bunch of people playing it, then often it can rocket you to the top of the charts. But if you can't reach that ignition point, then maybe you won't get going.
There is a critical mass effect.
Exactly that's the word I was looking for. Yeah. So you're going to guess?
This is the thing. So when I looked at this, I was expecting at least 3 figures because this is a AAA game from the visuals. But when I look behind the scenes, I'm only going to guess 66 reviews week 1.
Yeah, I'm going to guess 50.
It could do better because of the timing, because it's Halloween-y. No, seriously, because that will be a factor, and that might help with the critical mass effect.
I'm always sceptical about that, but I think you've historically been right when you said that.
I am right.
He usually is.
But yes, I might well be wrong about these numbers. We will see. Now on to something completely different.
My notes in its entirety for this game read, choo.
My notes start with, enter the nerds! This is Railroad Corporation 2, and I just want everyone to know I am delighted that this game exists, and I will never play it. So it's worth saying this is launching into early access. We've already said that that's a bit of a kind of curveball. You never know what that's going to do for you. Usually it's a bit of a depressor in terms of numbers, but I suspect it might not be the case in this case, because I think this is catering to a very distinct audience.
That said, distinct audiences have distinct tastes, and I've as far as I can tell, this isn't one of the bigger Rail franchises.
Yeah.
It clearly knows what it's doing, it's doing, but this is the kind of offering where you look at the reviews in week 2 and everyone is really furious because they're using the historically wrong gauge of track, or because
it's not Euro Truck Simulator
from steam to diesel or whatever. But I played railway simulators in my time, railway simulators, we say in Europe, thank you, and they're satisfying. They're sort of tailor-made for simulatory stuff, and model trains are great. So I think it'll do maybe 300 reviews,
which would be amazing,
which would be good,
especially in early access. So their last game is very similar. It's called Railroad Corporation, and that launched in 2019, end of 2019, and it has only, in inverted commas, 1,000 reviews. So I don't expect this to do millions of numbers, but I agree. I'm going to guess 367 reviews, just because I think that the people who like this sort of thing will buy it. Because if you're into trains, this is a train game. Let's buy it. And I just love the fact that it has like an accounting GIF on the Steam page. This is just, I'm very happy this exists. So good luck to them. I think this is the top seller by our prediction so far, which you would not necessarily expect looking at the names.
No, indeed.
Which is why we love Steam.
Although a challenger appears.
Oh, yes, it does. So this, I was quite upset by this. This is Worshippers of Cthulhu.
You were upset by it? Is it because your sanity was blasted?
Yes, it's because, you know, the Eldritch Horrors just
Is it the
came
back?
in. No, do you know, this is really pathetic, right? So I'm a big Lovecraft fan. I've read literally every single one of his stories and multiple times, which also means I'm a nerd about Lovecraft. And I think what this does very well, apart from looks gorgeous, is it captures how horrible you have to be a cultist who actually, like, supports or like, you know, worships a old god, right? Because they're really bad news. They're not fun. There's not kind of a fluffy side of them. There's not the nice one who looks after everybody. They're all just awful. And most Lovecraftian stories are actually about kind of normal humans being very frightened of these cults. You know, there's not a single story where it's like, oh, and then I went downstairs and I did a ritual sacrifice to Cthulhu. But that is basically the point of this game. So the reason this upset me is because it's really horrible. There's bits where you set fire to people and you hear their screams. There's a particularly unpleasant bit where you carve like sigils into people's backs with a knife. And I'm not saying you shouldn't play it for that reason. You know, I welcome all kinds of games for all different types of people. But yeah, this isn't the kind of Lovecraft that I particularly enjoy.
But wait a minute.
But that doesn't mean anything.
Our long-term listeners are saying, Lottie, weren't you partly responsible, 50% responsible for Cultist Simulator?
Well, exactly, but that's the thing. So that's all done by the sidelines, which is very Lovecraftian, right? It's all like the corner of your eye.
So this what I was thinking, actually, looking at this, is this looks like the kind of game people would have expected to get when they clicked on something called Cultist Simulator.
Yeah.
Because it
That's
actually
very fair.
it looks like a city builder. It looks like an actual simulator. You know, we called Cultist Simulator in a semi-tongue-in-cheek way.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I looked at the forums there, I saw somebody with one of the Cultist Simulator badges, the Neville badge.
Also, I just want to point out that
posting
the Neville badge, Neville is literally the sweetest character in Cultist Simulator, so there's lots of irony going on here.
But it's obviously made with, I'm not sure love is quite the right word, but certainly attention, professionalism, and
Yeah, it's
creativity.
very polished, it's very impressive.
I suspect, because it's an unusual mishmash of different game elements, the sigils, the sacrifices, and the city building, I'm not sure it will be what people want. That said, it seems to have a lot of love. I've seen people say, you know, take my money on the forums.
Because that's the thing, if you like Cthulhu...
The demo peaked at about 300 players, which is good, but it is next fair, so it's not that good. But
300
it's early
concurrent
access.
players, right?
Yeah,
Right.
But it's early access, so that would expect to be a depressant. But it has Cthulhu, who's, you know, people still like dear old Cthulhu with his rubbery face. But their last city builder had almost the same numbers at launch, looking at the analytics. But it's now only 240 reviews, mostly positive, after 4 months. So there's lots of arrows pointing in different directions here. And having spun the wheel, I'm going to guess 250 reviews week 1, which is lower than the numbers would indicate because of the early access, because of the unusual gameplay, because of the relatively muted response to their last city builder.
And I would expect that the reason they're launching it now is because of Halloween, so I think that will help them with the initial players, because people are looking for sort of thematically appropriate games to play. I was surprised too. The estimate that I came up with from just the raw numbers was a week 1 review number of 963, which would be astonishingly successful. And I just don't believe that's going to happen here. I don't believe that's true. So my suspicion is that lots of people have wishlisted it because it's Lovecraft, and basically if you like Lovecraft you wishlist Lovecraft games, but not that many people will actually pull the trigger because, as you say, it's a specific type of Lovecraft game. It's not just generic Lovecraft, and because maybe there are some interesting design decisions that might not gel together. It's worth, I looked at the developers' previous works like you did, and you can see them iterating. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are a bunch of elements from previous games that made it into this game because those worked in those games, but maybe they don't work in...
There's obviously real intelligence here. I'm going to give this a go. I'm very curious about it. I'm just...
it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm going to halve the estimate. I'm going to make it actually sneakily even lower than I put in my thing, because AK has been quite convincing just now. So I'm going to guess 400 reviews week 1. So more positive than Alexis, but still significantly less than what the numbers would suggest behind the scenes.
Right.
Interesting. Now on to kind of one of the opposite end of the spectrum, but on the same theme, Tormenture.
Is it Tormentor? Is it Tormentor? It's probably Tormentor.
I think it's Tormentor. I think, yeah, okay, thank you for that.
Columbia.
So I thought this was amazing looking. I'm a big fan of kind of retro horror games. I just think it's a really cool niche, and you can do it cheaply and you can do something innovative. If you've watched the trailer and you are a child of the 90s, you will immediately love it too, because it starts by blowing the air out of an old game cartridge and then reinserting it to make it work better, which is just something that lands. And then you feel, at one with the developer, who, by the way, is a single developer. So good luck to him, and I love seeing single developers out there. So I think it knows its audience. I think this is very much our example of a game made with love. It's so weird and there's lots of details in it. It is obviously pretty niche, looking at the graphics and the premise, but of course launching at Halloween will help it. And I suspect that it will stream pretty well, because it's, streamers famously like horror games. It's lots of nostalgia points, and you don't bet against nostalgia. So yeah, I'm going to guess 58 reviews week 1.
I was surprised at how little traction it has. It looks great, and as Lottie said, there's clearly an audience for this. And I was saying earlier, never bet against nostalgia. So the audience is there. I'm just not sure it will find it, given it's a small dev, doesn't have a publisher, but I'm not seeing the numbers. So I'm going to guess a flat 50.
But we wish it the best. Tarisland.
Yeah, so the developers of this game are that screenshot of the dwarf running across the tundra particularly.
You think they've played another game?
If I were Blizzard, I'd be reaching for a lawyer. But they're based in Beijing, so I think they're probably mostly safe from US-based lawsuits. I mean, presumably they could be sued in the US, but I was quite taken aback by how like World of Warcraft this looks. The map as well. The world of game dev is big, and I don't understand most of it, despite being a game dev at the upwards of 10. I'm not really sure if somebody's making a classic MMO in 2024. There was sort of this MMO cratering effect last decade, where it turned out there was room for World of Warcraft and some Korean games, and some other games that did different things. There was a battle royale, but the absolutely classic, it's like World of Warcraft thing, the sort of post-Ultima Online thing. I keep looking at these screenshots and thinking, I've basically played this game.
Maybe it's to do with not all Western games being available in China. Maybe World of Warcraft is not available in China.
Oh, that's it.
In which case, maybe China made their World of Warcraft and now it exported.
I mean, it certainly was available in China, famously. I used to play.
I don't know anything about it.
I used to play World of Warcraft at the point at which, because there was such a tradition of Chinese players being gold farmers, if you ran into somebody grinding in one of the gold friendly zones, some people would just say ni hao.
Oh, really?
To have it, yeah. No, so it's very much, but okay. maybe they've locked down. Again, minutes of research, guys. But look, these have got. There are some decent numbers attached to the back end of this that we can see. And
it's beautifully made by very talented developers. I don't want to be too negative about it.
That floating city mountain thing's pretty. But never underestimate the dragon.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess 200 reviews week 1.
And I'm going to guess very similarly, slightly more positively, as is my want, 235 reviews week 1, just because it's, yes, it's very similar to World of Warcraft, but it turns out World of Warcraft is incredibly successful. So, there's always more money to be got out of something like it. So we will see.
Yeah, Forest Hills : the last year. So this looked to me, again, I hesitate to say fast follow, but it looks like it's pretty. It looks like somebody addressing the moment that asymmetric horror games are having on Steam, with something that looks quite a lot like a number of other asymmetric horror games, and competently made and spooky. Competently sounds like I'm dissing it. It's not. Clearly, professionally made and spooky. But I think, did a bit of a deep dive onto what was happening with the.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into sort of gossipy stuff, and I have no idea about these developers. I've never heard of them until I saw their game come up. My understanding is this is a remake by a slightly different part of the original team who were making a game which was another remake of a slightly different fractured part of another team. So as far as I can tell, this is the sort of third iteration on the Forest Hills thing, which could be really great because it could mean that they've really got a clear idea of what works and what resonates with the audience, or it could be a problem because they might have a sort of Frankenstein assembly of different features that have kind of grown over the years. I don't know. Looking at it, I just thought it looked like really fun, pulpy, violent horror, and it was appropriate to play at Halloween. And you know, it's in film, it's very popular to have the kind of high school slasher style.
Well, I was going to say, never get bet against nostalgia, and the fact they're leading particularly into the American slasher thing is probably worth some sales. But I'm conservatively going to go with a boring 60 for a first week guess.
And I'm going to guess 80. So similar vibe, and that would be very respectable. But Halloween might push it up. Who knows? All right.
Jungle.
Now I've got a thing about monkeys because I'm not going to tell this story, but a monkey once bullied me and I'm not having it. And he won.
Lottie doesn't come out well out of the story.
Well, I'm not mean. I'm just clearly not the alpha in the monkey hierarchy.
No, so you were treated by a monkey.
I was. It was awful. A man had to come and save me with a stick. Anyway, so I'm not predisposed to like a monkey game, and I'm also not a puzzle platformer. So when I first saw this game, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And literally within about 10 seconds of watching the trailer, I was like,
the trailer is great.
This game is dope. Like, is adorable, funny, knows its audience, clearly well made, absolutely made with love, absolute labour of love. I really want this game to do really well, but of course, as it's a puzzle game on Steam, I'm not certain.
Puzzle? Well, it's a roguelike, really.
Okay, well, as...
God, I sounded so snooty there, didn't I? It's a roguelike, really.
You've been talking to the roguelike people. Anyway, whatever. So it's not a puzzler, it's a platformer, but you take my point. This is not, I don't look at this and it's not an FPS, right? So I'm not going to say immediately that Steam, or a systems-driven RimWorldy type, right? So this is not immediately a Steam obvious success story, but I hope it is because it's adorable, and you should watch the trailer and you'll see what I mean. I'm only going to guess 50 reviews because it's a single dev who has the great fortune to be called Bruno Bombardi, which is one of the best names ever. But yeah, 50 reviews, week one, and he deserves more.
So I immediately took to this dev when I looked at the forums.
Oh yeah.
Because there is a post from a while ago where somebody says, excuse me, you say that the hero of your game is an ape, but he's got a tail, which means he's a monkey. And the dev comes in and says, oh yes, I never thought of that, let's body it out. And in fact, if you read the Steam description now, it says he is a monkey hero. So I just, we love a responsive dev. We love a responsive dev, we love humility, we love people who change stuff.
Yeah, he's clearly got a sense of humour.
Such a charming human moment.
He is very charming.
My estimate is actually even lower than Lottie, sadly. I think it's probably going to be 35.
But we're rooting for Bruno.
Yeah. It looks to me a lot like Spelunky. It looks like sort of a better version of Spelunky in some ways, but Spelunky was a long time ago now. And there are other roguelike games. So I really hope it does better than I expect. Good
luck, Mr. Bombardi. Right, our final game of the episode. We've got, Royal Quest Online is the game, and you'll be looking at this as we are talking about it, and you might notice some similarities to Terraceland, which was another Chinese-based MMO thing.
Which, through the transitive miracle of ontological links, means that it also has a similarity to World of Warcraft. I think the similarity is marginally less, but it's still, again, it's quite eyebrow raising.
And it's a different developer, we should say. Yeah. It's not the same person.
So maybe World of Warcraft is about to be banned or has just been banned in China. We should go and look this up. I suspect somebody will have useful remarks and comments to enlighten us.
Yeah, I bet people have some good ideas.
Yeah.
The thing I found interesting about this was that the follower numbers, currently 6.6k, seem to imply much higher wish lists than they actually have. So according to my rough kind of back of the envelope calculations that I use to come up with the numbers, which are usually right, ish, I would expect them to have around 80,000 wish lists, which is what I would base the week one review numbers on, but they have a recent Steam post on their page where they say on the 9th of October that they have 23,000 wish lists. So I don't know how to explain that. Either there is maybe a Steam China thing that is counting for lots of wish lists that are not on the kind of Western Steam. I don't know how that works, the interplay between Steam China and Steam West. Or perhaps there is a higher tendency in China for people to follow a game rather than wishlist it, so maybe the ratio is different.
One of the things we learned
but that's a very unusual discrepancy.
We released the simplified Chinese translation of Book of Hours, is that Chinese access to Steam is limited. The phrase we've heard used is it's blurred, that often there are problems with access. They have to use different DNS providers or AVN to get to it at all, and that even having done that, it is hard to get to the forums.
Yeah, the community parts of Steam. So that would be the forums, that would be the community awards, that would be anything interacting with other Steam users. That appears to be blocked off from Chinese users in China.
So I would expect some, as you say, static around exactly what the numbers mean in these terms. So, and that is interesting, because I noticed the numbers seem to be about twice those of Taris Land.
So there's something going on, but I don't know what it is. I don't have that information.
Well, look, I'm guessing 300 reviews week one. Yeah. Partly because I went back and I lowered my numbers for Taris Land because I thought there's two really similar games launching within days of each other. So that's probably not going to benefit both of them because MMOs are jealous mistresses. And
the my estimates would imply 533 reviews week one, but I don't think that's going to do this. I think there's something funny about those numbers. So I also am going to halve it and estimate about 250 reviews. Lower than you, for once.
For once. Join me on the doom side.
No, we were happy. More MMOs.
Spin the wheel.
But yes, that is it for the 10 new games that we're talking about. Do you want to pick a wild card out of the games that we have looked at?
Embarrassment of riches here. Do you want to pick your wild card first and I'll pick one of the others?
That's very gentlemanly
because I gazumped you previously.
You did, and I'm still cross about it even though I can't remember what you did.
Columbia.
I am going to guess... I don't know. I think... Tormentia.
Tormentia.
I think Tormentia deserves more.
That was one of the one of the ones I might have picked. I'm going to pick Worshippers of Cthulhu.
You think it's going to be even better than we expect?
I think it might really take off because I'm so confused by all the different signals about it. I would like to pick Dun Jungle. I hope Dun Jungle does brilliantly, but I just don't see the numbers there. It's such a tough thing to make into. Worshippers of Cthulhu is such an unusual game, and there is clearly enthusiasm on the forums that I can see it doing bigger numbers than I expect.
All right, well, you watching this, please, if you have opinions about estimates, if you think we've got something wrong, if you think that we have missed a vital piece of information about a game that will radically change our opinion, please leave it in the comments because we're actually learning a lot from what
they say wisely, they say never read the comments, but I do read the comments every week on every 2 weeks on these things, and I usually learn something. So thank you, everyone.
And we'd love to hear your estimates if you are brave enough to put them in front of the public for consumption. And we will be back in another fortnight with a review of the games we talked about today and 10 shiny new games to estimate and hopefully get right.
Spin the wheel.
Thanks for watching. See you next time. Anybody